we gon' burn it down.
Hey, beautiful people of the internet, how are you guys doing today? Hopefully great, and welcome to Budget Builds, where we use zero Forma and achieve maximum efficiency. In today's video, we're taking a closer look at Khora, aka the crazy cat lady of Warframe. So ladies and gentlemen, I put a ton of work and effort into this particular build, so I'd really appreciate it if you guys would leave a like and also Spartan the subscribe button for more Warframe videos, as my neck is currently killing me. Without further ado, let's get this video on the road, shall we? Just like every other episode of Budget Build, we are briefly going to be going over each and every single one of Khora's abilities. Now, most of you guys who are watching this probably already know exactly how these abilities work and are really here for the build itself. So I'll make this short and sweet. So our first ability is called Whip Claw, and this basically allows you to go and utilize Khora's signature weapon, which is, surprise surprise, a whip. So let's say that you guys are into BDSM and you like to be the dominant one in the role. This is the ideal frame for you. You know what I'm saying? Wink wink. Next up is we do have Ensnare, and this is basically another grouping based ability which allow you to go and clump up all the enemies in one single place, providing not only great crowd control but also the ability to go and clear out all the ads, as you'll be able to go and hit all the enemies in one single blow with Whip Claw. Fantastic ability. I do suggest that you guys go and utilize this as much as humanly possible. Next up is we do have Vanari, and this is arguably the most weakest ability in Khora's entire kit, just because of the fact that the way the AI works. Because the problem that I have with companions is that they always have to be on the other side of the map. They can't be as useful as sentients or sentinels that are always by your side. So what this does is basically allows you to go and switch to 3 different modes that Vanari has: attack, heal, and support. So with this build, you are mainly going to be utilizing the heal, but because this is an episode of budget builds, we are not going to be utilizing Helmuth. That is going to be coming up in the next ability or next video, because I do want to go and min-max my Khora build. So I'll probably be replacing Vanari with maybe Gloom or whatever I actually currently want. Maybe try and give myself more damage if it is humanly possible. Next up is we do have Strangle Dome, and this works very similar to the way Frost's globe work, except it is a globe full of chains, and the way the chains work is any enemy that's daring to come close to it will then be grabbed by the chains and then be swung around just like chandeliers. Not only does this provide great crowd control, but also if you guys do activate your Whip Claw and hit the Strangle Dome itself, while it still has enemies, you'll then be able to share that damage across the entire cage. Very good. And if you guys do go and place it correctly, you'll be able to go and extend your reach even further to a much greater area. As for the build, here's what we've got. Up here you can tell we haven't added any Forma, because this wouldn't be an episode of budget builds now with it. Now this particular build is actually a double-edged sword, and here's why. So in our aura, you guys can see we've got something called Combat Discipline, and the way it works is basically every time you go and kill an enemy, you'll then go and lose a little bit of health, and in exchange for that health loss, double at which that you went and sacrificed will then be returned to your allies. Now why we want this is purely because you guys can go and activate Arcane Avenger at will, and the way it works is basically if you guys are damaged in any way or form, which Combat Discipline will meet that requirement, you'll then will have a 21% chance to go and have a 45% overall critical chance. Now this critical chance does apply to all your weapons, including Khora's exalted based whip. Now one thing I do want to say is that 45% critical chance is actually a little bit of a lie, or not really a lie, but it does seem like, from a visual perspective, it does seem that it's actually not that much, but trust me, it is a ton. That 45% critical chance is multiplicative, and on top of that, it actually does take into consideration your mods after all the buffs. So in other words, you're going to be seeing constant red crits if you guys do go and mod correctly. Now of course we are going to be rolling around with Arcane Energize, purely because of the fact that this is a energy hungry based build. So you're going to be using your ability a lot. In fact, you are going to be spamming it. So trust me, by having Arcane Energize, you're going to be having a really good energy economy, or at least less restriction on it, as Arcane Energize still isn't enough. As for our other mods, here's what we've also got: Power Drift, Intensify, and Augur Secrets for more power strength. More power strength allows you to deal a lot more damage with your whip, and on top of that, Vanari's healing potential will be a lot higher. Why do we need Vanari's healing? Is mainly because of combat discipline. Now remember, like I said in the beginning of this build, this is a double-edged sword. So in other words, combat discipline, if you guys are not careful, you can actually go and kill yourself. And trust me, with Vanari's healing, that is going to be a lifesaver. Even though, like I said in the beginning of this video, that the AI isn't very good because Vanari will be on the other side of the map. But trust me, having no healing is better, or having some healing is better than no healing whatsoever. Next up is we do have stretch for a little bit of range. Now listen, you do not want to have so much range for Khora because of the fact that her whip can actually go and miss, especially if the enemies are too close to you. By you having stretch, will then have a little bit of range for your strangle dome and your ensnare. If you guys want my honest opinion, go and play around with stretch and auger reach. If you guys feel like your ensnare and strangle dome is enough and you feel like you don't need enough range, preferably go and add like a utility mod to this, maybe like another gladiator mod, or maybe more power strength, or whatever you guys prefer to go and have. Maybe even more duration, that way you guys can make sure that your ensnare and your strangle dome can last a lot longer. We also have prime flow. Once again, we want to have less restriction on our abilities at all. We want to go and use them without worrying about, hey, do I have enough energy? Of course, we've got prime flow, we've got plenty of energy. We're also going to be using the gladiator mod set, therefore we can have even more critical chance, therefore we can always be in the red crit territory. Now I'm specifically using gladiator resolve because remember, more health. Thanks to combat discipline, we will have a much bigger health pool, therefore we will have less likely that we will go and slash ourselves to death. Gladiator finesse isn't really that optional, if I'm being honest with you. You guys can go and put on a different gladiator mod. I just want to put on gladiator finesse mainly because, you know, it's gold, and gold actually looks better than any of the other mod class because, you know, I like to feel special. But also gladiator finesse also allows you to, you know, stay alive, assuming that you guys actually do have, you know, any energy to spare whatsoever. But that drain isn't really going to be that useful thanks to combat discipline. So once again, feel free to add any gladiator mod that you currently can, whether it's gladiator finesse or the other one that's actually a lot easier to go and get. And finally, we have the most important mod for this build, and that is accumulating whip claw. This is an augment that's exclusive to Khora, and basically it makes your whip a lot more powerful every time you go and hit 3 or more enemies. Excuse me. So every time you go and hit 3 or more enemies, what's going to happen is you'll then be granted 35% additional damage output. This can be capped out at 350 seconds. However, after 10 seconds, it'll then decay shortly. But of course, if you guys are, you know, continuously hitting the enemies, you'll then always have the maximum output of accumulating whip claw. Now, on top of the mods that we actually have onto Khora, there's still one more thing that we are missing, and that is our melee of choice. But before I go on with the melee itself, I do want to talk about the school tree. So I'm actually going to be rolling around with Vazarin, mainly because of how useful it is on keeping you alive. Because remember, Khora is very squishy and armor doesn't really scale. Only like a handful of frames out there, particularly Nidus, actually has scaling armor that literally becomes unkillable if you guys can have all your abilities up and running. So Vazarin definitely help you thanks to protective dash, and on top of that, it's actually got a really good grouping ability, that being Vazarin's number 2. Now as for the damage or the melee weapon that you are going to be using doesn't really play that much of a role. It's only depending on the mod that you guys currently are using. So we are going to be using the Pangolin Prime because we can actually go and use all of its slots, because the Pangolin Prime does come with 2 Y polarities. So as you guys can see, here is a build. Now the stats that we currently have on the weapon has no effect on Khora's whip whatsoever. It's mainly got everything to do with the mods that we currently have. Because remember, the only thing that you guys want to really use the melee weapon is as a vessel for these mods themselves. So one thing I do want to say is, once again, I'm using the Pangolin Prime because it comes with 2 Y polarities without adding any Forma whatsoever. As you guys can see up here, there isn't any Forma. Excuse me. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be using your standard critical chance based build. So we're going to be using Blood Rush, Gladiator Might, and Sacrificial Steel for our crits. Remember, Gladiator Might, not only does it give us an increase to our set bonus, but also we are going to be receiving a much higher critical damage. Remember, if you guys are dealing with crits, you always want to increase your critical damage output, because crits with critical damage will give you much higher damage numbers. We're also going to be using Gladiator Rush, mainly because of the stat bonus, and also nice thing about Gladiator Rush is the combo duration will definitely help you guys retain your combo as much possible. Can't believe I repeated myself, don't know what was happening there. Moving on. Next up is we do have Pressure Point. Now Pressure Point is our melee damage or our base damage. You must have a base damage, otherwise you're not going to have big values, because remember, base damage is going to allow you to crit off of something. Of course, this is a budget build, so therefore you will be needing Forma if you want to go and make it a lot more potent. Go and add yourself a prime pressure point or a sacrificial pressure, therefore you guys can increase your critical chance, therefore much bigger numbers. Now of course we are going to be dealing around with Weeping Wounds. The reason why we want to deal with Weeping Wounds is pretty so that we can go and have an increase in status. The way that Weeping Wounds works is basically the exact same as the way the Gladiator set bonus works, or even Blood Rush. You'll then gain 40% stage chance for every combo multiplier. So remember, with our melee weapon, we want to make sure that our combo multiplier is maxed out, therefore we can have max crit, max stage chance. And of course we've got ourselves two old school mods called Jagged Edge and Buzzkill. Now why I've got these two is mainly because by default Khora's whip is actually an impact based weapon. Excuse me. Now what we want to do is we basically want to make sure that slash gets proc as much as humanly possible. Remember, if you guys do equip a lot of slash onto armor, you'll basically be able to go and decimate their armor without any problems whatsoever. Now slash basically allows you to, or these two mods will basically allow you to go and prioritize slash mainly, especially on your guy's whip. However, if you guys want to go and pull out viral, you can go and do so. Just simply go and replace these two mods with say cold and toxin. Of course the 60/60 version if you guys really want to, or even the 90/90. That's entirely up to you, as the 90/90 versions will require you to go and add a ton of extra Forma. Guys can see we've got ourselves a bunch of dummies here. I'm just going to activate Vazran's 2, group up all these enemies like so. Once we're happy, we're just going to then attack them till our combo counter is maxed out. Okay, now we're just going to attack them, and as you guys can see, there's a ton of red crits that's happening, and of course slash will absolutely decimate the enemy. Now one thing I do want to say is that this isn't exactly the maximum she can go, as we currently only have around 130% accumulative whip claw. So once again, we're just going to keep rinsing and repeating until we have the maximum output. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today's video. As you guys can see, this build is absolutely insane. It's got a lot of range, a lot of damage output, and of course it is fun because remember, we are red crit fanatics. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys have liked the video or it's helped you guys out in any way or form, remember to leave a like, and also don't forget to Spartan click the subscribe button for more Warframe videos and streams. Up make like a banana and split.